So last night, President Trump unveiled his new pick to fill in the now vacant seat of Anthony Kennedy. Now, Kennedy, of course, stepped down last month, and there might have been a little bit of a secret deal between Donald Trump and Anthony Kennedy. And I believe we're seeing the fruits of that secret deal right now, because it turns out Brett Kavanaugh, who is a 53-year-old U.S. Circuit Court judge for Washington, D.C., also happened to intern and clerk for Anthony Kennedy. Wild coincidence, right? No, not at all. So, look, I want to go through his policy positions and his different rulings to show you why progressives should be absolutely against this person. And let's start out with corporations. Now, according to Fortune, the White House reportedly sent an email to industry stakeholders Monday night, which is when Trump made his announcement, highlighting Kavanaugh's pro-business and anti-regulation record in an attempt to help to get their help to push through his nomination. So right now, establishment Republicans are like, yes, we love Kavanaugh. He is incredibly pro-business. He's very pro-Wall Street. He's anti-regulation. We love this guy. Now, the extreme right thinks that Kavanaugh isn't conservative enough. So, look, you've got people like Mark Meadows from the Freedom Caucus that are like, I don't know, we don't think he's conservative enough. Can you pick somebody more conservative? But wait a minute. Kavanaugh is already the most conservative Supreme Court, or if he's, of course, confirmed, he would be the most conservative Supreme Court justice on the bench ever. Not conservative enough. Not conservative. Okay, well, again, let me go through his corporate, his stances on corporations. Now, according to Politico, part of the email read, Judge Kavanaugh protects American businesses from illegal job-killing regulations. And not only that, but Kavanaugh helped to kill President Obama's most destructive new environmental rules. Destructive environmental rules. So destructive to what? Remember, we had all these regulations, right? And businesses were still doing incredibly well. Job-killing regulations. But wait, we don't have those regulations anymore. Well, what about jobs? Well, unemployment is down. But the quality of those jobs is not very good. Pay has definitely not gone up. Every once in a while, somebody gets a very small bonus or has gotten a small bonus. But generally, they're not actually creating more jobs. And in fact, thanks to Trump's tariffs, jobs are actually leaving and going other places. Look at Harley Davidson. So anyway, and look, the tariffs aren't even into effect yet for the most part. Now, in his time serving on the U.S. District Court of Appeals for Washington, D.C., Kavanaugh had consistently voted to roll back rules and regulations. He had overruled regulators on cases ranging from consumer protections to net neutrality rules 75 times, and even ruled that the structure of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is unconstitutional. That one agency, that was actually looking out for you before Mick Mulvaney took it over. Yeah, this guy, Supreme Court nomination, right? Somebody who's gotten a nomination to the Supreme Court thinks that's unconstitutional. Oh boy, that's not good. Now, Kavanaugh has also written a number of rulings to cut back environmental regulations implemented during the Obama administration and considers net neutrality to be unlawful. The whole idea that the government says, here are some ground rules. We're not going to interfere. Corporations can't interfere. We've got to let the internet run naturally without corporate interference. And we're not going to interfere either as the government. That's unlawful. Oh, it exceeds the government's mandate. It exceeds the government power. Great. So, look, if you wanted to keep the trend of the Supreme Court being the most anti-consumer court, then Kavanaugh is definitely your guy. Wonderful. Now, if you give a shit about net neutrality as well, again, you're out of luck. or the environment. Now, moving on, how about social issues, right? In the case of Garza versus Hargan, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals held that an undocumented teenage immigrant was entitled to obtain an abortion without having to obtain familial consent. Now, familial consent is required in several states, but not in a lot of other states. Now, Kavanaugh, of course, had disagreed. He said, "Is it really absurd for the United States to think that the minor should be transferred to her immigrant sponsor, ordinarily a family member, relative, or friend, before she makes that decision?" Well, look, I think that's actually her decision, but nonetheless, because I believe it's her body. Now, but what Kavanaugh is saying is, look, I believe in parental consent rules, and I believe in enforcing them in whatever situation that I deem to see fit, because I am pro-life. Now, that throws up a red flag if you actually believe in safe legal abortion, because, look, if a case comes to the Supreme Court, and President Trump has said overturning Roe v. Wade is one of my biggest considerations in actually picking a Supreme Court nominee, well, then this could be problematic. Very, very problematic for abortion rights, for reproductive rights. Now, it's possible that he could do the same thing in Obergefell, right? Now, Obergefell, of course, is the ruling that legalized same-sex marriage. Or he could even take a look at Griswold v. Connecticut. Now, that decision, of course, forbid the government from banning contraception like it did pre-60s. Now, why? Well, it's because this guy's an originalist. He doesn't think the government has that power. His main thing is interpreting the Constitution as it's written. And that basically means that a substantive due process, the doctrine underneath all those Supreme Court decisions, he contends is illegitimate. And Kavanaugh has used that ruling, that view, in several other governmental regulation rulings. So he's very, very pro-corporate. He's likely to rule against same-sex marriage and abortion rights. And, of course, the ACA. He's a big opponent of that. Now, the ACA has a case that's coming, which will decide whether to keep or rule invalid provisions requiring insurers to cover pre-existing conditions and not raise premiums based on illness or gender. So, but all of that is actually not why Trump picked Kavanaugh. Oh, that's icing on the cake. Because again, Donald Trump loves his corporate sponsors. He loves his friends in business that give him all sorts of money. But the real reason, actually, is this. Writing for the Minnesota Law Review in 2012 in an article titled "Separation of Powers During the 44th Presidency and Beyond," Kavanaugh, who had worked on the Ken Starr investigation into Bill Clinton, said his experience working for the Bush White House, which he had gotten afterward, made him realize that being president is far more difficult than any other civilian position in government. Okay, look, is he right about that? Is it a difficult position? Well, unless you're Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, remember, he takes executive time. And he makes sure to do as little amount of briefings as possible. But okay. Now, to everybody else who actually works and does research and reads and makes sure that he is actually doing the things that he's supposed to do as president, it's a difficult job. That's why President Obama's hair turned gray immediately after taking office. But he says it frankly makes being a member of Congress or the judiciary look rather easy by comparison. The decisions as president must make are hard and often life or death. The pressure is relentless. The problems arise from all directions. The criticism is unremitting and personal. And at the end of the day, only one person is responsible. For President Trump, again, it wasn't my fault. It's everybody else's fault. I do no wrong. But anyway, on this basis, Kavanaugh basically believes that presidents should be able to focus their never-ending tasks with as few distractions as possible. So don't distract the president with anything else because he's got a big job to do. Now, can you think of anything happening to President Trump that is considered a distraction by members of the right wing? Would it happen to be that investigation, that so-called witch hunt that's found quite a few witches, called the Mueller investigation. He said, looking back to the late 1990s, this is Kavanaugh, the nation certainly would have been better off if President Clinton could have focused on Osama bin Laden without being distracted by the Paula Jones sexual harassment case and its criminal investigation offshoots. He argued that criminal investigations are inevitably politicized by both their supporters and critics, and that a president's indictment and trial would cripple the federal government, rendering it unable to function with credibility in either the international or domestic arenas. Even the lesser burdens of a criminal investigation, including preparing for questioning by criminal investigators, are time-consuming and distracting. So understand what he's saying. You shouldn't distract a president who might have broken the law. Hey, look, if he broke the law, you shouldn't go after him for that, because that's distracting. So that Mueller investigation, shut it down. It's distracting the president. It is doing, and an indictment would cripple the federal government. We can't have that happen. We got to have the federal government working, even if the president is a criminal. Now, right here is where I can imagine Trump supporters twisting themselves into a pretzel had Hillary Clinton won the election. Because it would be almost certain that the Republicans would have launched 40 investigations into Hillary Clinton and her private email server and anything else that they could think of. Benghazi, probably. So, just it's just sort of ironic when you think about that, and you think about Kavanaugh, who are now being cheered on by a lot of conservatives, saying that, oh, a president, you can't indict a president. You can't indict a sitting president. It's a distraction. He's got to be able to do his job. Interesting. Where's the Law and Order crowd? I don't know where they went to. They seem to have disappeared today. Strange how that happens. But make no mistake, I believe that this is the number one reason why Donald Trump picked Brett Kavanaugh, why he was on the short list. Again, he's got all these conservative positions that are great for the donors. And look, it's a great establishment pick. Mitch McConnell loves him. He says he's superb. He'll be a superb justice. But in reality, this is about Trump wanting the Mueller investigation to go away. This is something that has vexed him since the first day he stepped into office. So he wants it gone. And so he's, of course, pairing up with people or choosing judges that agree that, you know what, you shouldn't go after a sitting president. Yeah, maybe in the long run, when he's not sitting president, that might hurt him. But right now, all he's worried about is while he's president, is about the Mueller investigation, and he wants it to go away. That's my that's my sort of insight into this, and my guess as to why Trump chose Kavanaugh among the other wildly conservative justices that he could have picked. So, and look, all these different reasons and many more is why we should be, of course, fighting against Kavanaugh. There shouldn't be any Democrat, as our good friend Peter Dow, and I never thought that I would say that, says that any Democrat who supports and votes for Justice Kavanaugh to make him a justice shouldn't be a Democrat, shouldn't be in the party. Well, Pete, I'm with you. We got to fight against this guy because, look, the future of a lot of policy is at stake. Hey, everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.